So today I'm going to be demonstrating why ChatGPT is not going to be replacing any developers anytime soon. But before I do that, I have to give you a little backstory on what the sequence of events were that brought us to this point. I made a video a couple months ago where I had ChatGPT make a website for me, and I basically just pasted every bit of its output into an editor, and then I ran it just to see what it produced. But honestly, I just produced that video because I knew ChatGPT was going to make a fool out of itself, and so I just kind of provided the opportunity for it to do so. However, this is a little different. The thing we're going to be looking at today is a real project for a real client who's paying real money, and I was relying on ChatGPT 4. Now I paid for 4, so I'm paying the $20 a month. I'm not using the free 3.5 one. I'm using 4, and I really needed ChatGPT's help because it was kind of outside of my comfort zone, and it didn't get it done for me, not even close. So in this case, I really wanted ChatGPT 4 to succeed. I should also mention that I really like ChatGPT. It's actually been providing me a lot of value, particularly in the creative department. My now wife is involved in a lot of creative type things, and ChatGPT 4 has been really good for coming up with different kind of ideas. And it's also helped me out with some ideas for some other stuff that's not programming related. But today, I'm not relying on ChatGPT for carrot cake recipes. I am relying on ChatGPT to produce a piece of code that I'm actually just not sure how to produce. The thing about asking ChatGPT to help you code is that a lot of people, when they're testing out ChatGPT's capabilities to figure out what it can do, they're asking it things that are probably not the things that would get asked by a non-developer who wants to perform a development function by using ChatGPT. And that would be what would occur if a developer's job was replaced with a non-developer. A non-developer is not going to come in here and say, produce a function that takes 2 arguments, n1 and n2, which are integers, and return their sum. Do this in JavaScript. And if you give this to ChatGPT, it's just going to spit out the exact thing you need, pretty much no problem. And don't get me wrong, it's really cool that it can do this, but this does not replace jobs. So let's move on to the actual problem at hand. So I am basically filling the role of a non-developer in this case. And the project I'm working on is a C# project. And I don't really know much about C#. You know, I'm a JavaScript developer primarily. I know Python, C, those sorts of languages. But for C#, I don't have a ton of domain expertise in that, or really anything Microsoft in general. So the idea was to get ChatGPT to kind of give me hopefully like a 50% product, and then I could just modify it the rest of the way. And what I was asked to do is I was given API documentation in PDF format, and I was asked to build a API in C# that basically mimicked the functionality of the API documentation. Part of why I decided to buy ChatGPT 4 in the first place was for advanced data analysis, which is a thing that allows you to upload files into ChatGPT and use that as part of the context. So you could upload a text file and say, turn this text file into a bunch of columns and give me different files with the output or whatever you want. And I think I was scrolling on X or Reddit or somewhere else, and I saw somebody who used ChatGPT to take a screenshot of a user interface, and it was able to produce the equivalent HTML and CSS or MUI or whatever and create the equivalent code for that web UI, and I thought that was amazing. And I already thought of a couple of use cases I could use that for in my professional life, and so I wanted to check it out to see if it worked. But for whatever reason, it didn't. I still don't know why, but Google Bard does work, so I used that instead. But anyway, here's ultimately what I asked ChatGPT for is I did upload file, I picked API docs, and then I gave it this prompt. Can you look at this API documentation PDF on pages 59 through 65 and supply the code to replicate an API that accomplishes the same thing? It should take the same request and produce the same response. The code should be written in ASP.NET Web API. Before I click enter on this, I want to actually show you the contents of this PDF. Here's the PDF that I'm asking it to look at. So this is Create Patient. It's a medical related API. And so this is page 59. This is the one that I said it starts at. So this is the request. And you can see there's a bunch of properties and descriptions, whether they're required. And then they use indentation to denote like what is a subproperty. And then it's the same for the rest of the way down. So page 60, page 61, 62, 63, 64, 65. And then at the very bottom of 65 is the response that it should give, which is really just a few different fields. So I'm gonna start this thing up now, and I'll just narrate what it's doing, and I'll just speed it up where appropriate. So it's funny, like right off the bat, it wouldn't even read it. I had to upload it a second time, but it's still working. So right off the bat, it already made an error. It thinks it's looking at the update patient and delete appointment, which it's not. It's supposed to be create patient. So at this point, I told it to stop generating, and I said, that's not the right section. It should be create patient on pages 59 to, is it 65? Yeah, 65. So you can kind of hint to ChatGPT that it's doing something wrong, and it usually goes back and works again. What's actually occurring with advanced data analysis is ChatGPT is writing Python, which is looking at the file, and then it's giving itself the output. And then if it's wrong, it updates the Python, and then it reads it differently. So I told it it's on the wrong page, and it's going to read it again here. So it at least got the right section this time, but this is the first thing that it messed up, is it didn't take into account the actual nested properties. It just totally ignored that. And it only did some of the properties. It didn't do all of them. Obviously there's like 500 to do. And, I do need it to give all the properties, and I do need it to take into account the nesting of the properties. So I'm just going to tell it that. This is a good start, but can you list all the properties and also take into account the nesting of properties? One such nesting is the practice object. So what's supposed to be is practice, and then nested, practice ID, practice name, external ID. So let's see what it does. So finished. It's getting kind of close now. So it moved practice out into its own thing and did practice info, but it's not giving me all the properties. So please include every property on pages 59 to 65. So you might be saying, you're being lazy, engineer man. Just write the properties yourself. And remember, this is an exercise in saying, what can ChatGPT do? And for this actual project, ultimately what I did is I did handwrite every property. That's ultimately what what happened. But if I'm not a developer, I'm not gonna be able to do that. I need ChatGPT to give me something workable instantly, or it's not overly useful. So it gave me the new updated version here. It did add a lot more properties, but it did mess up a bunch of stuff. So guarantor is much longer than 5 properties. I think it was a total of 25 or so, and some of the properties that are supposed to go into guarantor are instead in create patient request. And then if you notice, practice info is just gone now. It's not even included in here. So it's not giving me the thing that I need. However, the good thing is that I am a developer, and so it's giving me enough to where it kind of helps. I just have to, just fill in the blanks. And one of the big problems that it was having, and it's being less verbose as to what problem it's having. It used to be a lot more verbose as to what it's doing. It used to say like, okay, I can't see the structure, properly, the indents or whatever, so let me rewrite the code to, get the indents properly. And then it would say, I still can't read it. Let me make more adjustments. I still can't read it. And eventually the whole thing would just crash and it wouldn't actually work. So ultimately what I did is, rather than rely on it to extract the stuff out of the PDF, I did the extraction out of the PDF, and I gave it a pre-indented, pre-formatted text file, and I basically said, take this thing, which is already properly indented, and create request models for C# Web API. I can't find the original file, but I did find the conversation that I had when I tried to use this file. So in input.txt was literally just the PDF documentation, every property nested by 4 spaces, if it was a nested property, and I described that to ChatGPT. I said, attaches a text file containing fields for an API. Some fields are part of an object and are indented. Each indent is 4 spaces, so it should be easy to parse. I need these fields converted into a request model for an ASP.NET Core Web API program. So let's skim through this. It did a bunch of work analyzing it. It asked me if I should assume all the fields are type string. I said yes, assume all are strings. It did some more work. It generated some code. I downloaded it, and I noticed that it totally ignored any nesting. So I said the request model did not include any of the nested objects. Please add the nested object as denoted by indentation. And then it did some more work, more work, more work, more work. It gave me a new download, and I said almost properties that do not have a nested object should be public string and not public class. And he said, I see, update the code. So it kept working and working and working and working. So then I got a new file, and I said, it looks like the root properties with no nested objects have been removed. It just took out a bunch of stuff. And this is one thing about ChatGPT 4, or really any language model, I think, is that you never get the same thing twice. And I had this problem the other day when I was trying to deterministically generate images with DALL-E 3. And the problem is once I generate the first image, you can say use the style of that image during that same conversation, but if you go to a new conversation and give it the exact same prompt, you're going to get a completely different image and a completely different style. And maybe that's okay, maybe it's not, it just depends on what you're using it for, but for what I was using it for, that was not a particularly good thing. So finally it gave me like a 5th version of the C# file, and I wish I could download and show it, but it's expired. But it was pretty close, but it was really just the request models. Just to get that, I had to do a lot of manual work from the PDF to turn it into something usable by ChatGPT. And then I didn't really get any web API code. I had to go back and say, what's a boilerplate web API look like? And, it just gives me one file, but that's not good enough. So I ended up having to find, as an example, some skeleton web API project, and I used that along with the request models that ChatGPT gave me, and then I changed them up by hand, and then that was my starting point. But that was all to say that it was very labor intensive for me, number one, and two, I feel like it really did require that I be a developer. If I was not a developer, I would have had a very bad time, and I would not have got this done, not even close. And so I think that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that despite how smart this thing is about maybe, doing some grunt work or writing up a short piece of code or just doing something that is objectively easy, if unless it's doing that, it's gonna struggle on the complex stuff. And the exact thing that I had to do, I would consider quite advanced. Hey, go look at these pages in the PDF of unknown quality and, produce something usable from that. I really didn't think it was going to do that, and it didn't. So in short, if ChatGPT is going to replace jobs, it needs to be able to do stuff like that. But don't worry, it's not all bad though. I asked ChatGPT's DALL-E 3 what it would look like if a cat ruled a fictional futuristic planet, and these are the results, and I gotta say, I'm not particularly disappointed at any of these. It did a really good job here, just not so much with API documentation. That's it for the video. Hopefully it was really informative. If you have any questions or comments about anything that I talked about in this video, please definitely let me know below in the comments. Thanks a lot for watching, and take care.